So let's get started. This is, it's 7:36. It's Monday, September 14th. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Village of Ossining Historic Preservation Commission. We are doing this online pursuant to Governor Cuomo's executive orders in light of the still ongoing public health emergency. We have one application before us tonight, and I wanted to make sure we address that before anything else. Is the applicant here, Jaime?
They are. I'm going to promote them to panelists right now.
Okay.
We have Mr. Scott Kamen. How do you pronounce your last name, Mr. Scott? You have to unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good. Scott Kamen.
Kamen, all right.
Stuart, I don't have any issue with Mr. Kamen remaining audio only. Is there any problem from the village's standpoint, or Mr. Kamen?
None whatsoever, Adam.
Okay.
There we go.
And now we have him.
Okay. Okay. Good evening, Mr. Kamen. I don't believe you and I have met before. I really can't tell you how sad I was to learn of Joanne's passing. And I really, truly wish you and your family my deepest condolences. Her loss was a great loss for the village. And again, you and I have never met, but Joanne and I met about 3+ years ago. And she took me on to the HPC and took me under her wing, notwithstanding the fact that I didn't have not even an ounce, of experience compared to hers. I'm not an architect, I'm not a historian, but she had faith in me, and I really appreciated her for reaching out to me and taking me under her wing. And I was very, very sad to hear about her passing. So I'm sorry.
Thank you.
That said, I have no issue impartially reviewing this application, which to me appears to be a very straightforward application. It looks from the history of things that you had originally sought a building permit directly from the buildings department. That was denied, and then a referral was made to the HPC. And I can understand why you thought you might not have to go in front of the HPC, because it appears to me you're just replacing a metal roof with a metal roof. But let's talk about it some more. Tell us about your plans.
Well, first of all, I wasn't sure of the procedure. In New York City, you have to submit to the DOB, and then they reject it and send you back to LP landmarks. So I didn't mean to try to get around LPC.
No, I didn't.
Or HPC for sure. But having said that, yeah, the roof is over 100 years old. When we purchased the house, it had been coated with tar, black tar. We had used a preservation coating that was approved by the Federal Landmarks Commission for use on federal properties. And we've been pushing that metal roof along for about 35 years now, but it's finally reached the end of even its coatable life. So what Joanne and I had planned to do was to replace it with a 16 gauge copper roof. And I have samples of the material to show you guys if you want to see it. But it would be copper from the eave to the ridge and back on the other side. And I'm really looking forward to it, because I think that's will be the roof's finest hour in over 100 years.
A question about the what the roof looks like at the rear of the house. It's hard to tell from the photos. Is it shingled in the rear portion?
No, it's a stamped metal pattern in the back and a standing seam in the front. I'm going to guess that that's what the installer had in the back of his cart at that time.
Uh-huh.
The two sides do not meet, but they appear to have installed at the same time. I'm really not sure why that pattern changes. But I'd like to keep the standing seam because that's what faces the street, and I think the building, it's more in keeping with the building, this part of the house, which is 1860s roughly. So, you know, the standing seam was very common at that point.
The seam will be on the front only or front and rear?
Front and rear, front and rear.
And your plans also include replacing both the front and rear built-in gutters, is that right?
Yes, the what I call the Yankee gutters or the built-in gutters will be repaired and refabricated in metal. In copper, actually.
Okay.
As will the eave moldings and the underside of the soffit.
You think that they'll probably need to be replaced as a result of the work that you're doing, or
some of it, which forces me, although I wouldn't change it, but I have to match it so that I can join it because several areas are rotted away at this point. I actually have the matching pieces with me.
Like in front of you at this minute?
This point? Yeah. This would be the, I don't know if you can see it, but this would be the cove molding that you're seeing at an angle in the photo.
Sure.
And more or less, it's pretty spot on, and we're able to join it. And then the underside of the soffit will be the same tongue and groove. I guess you could, I'm showing you the section of it so you can see the shape. So a lot of that there are pieces there that over the years were replaced in plywood. So I'll put that back to tongue and groove as we've done in a lot of the portion of the house. And then this is, I had the contractor actually create a piece of the roof with the standing seam that I'm proposing.
Okay. That answers my questions about the application. Does anyone else have any questions for Mr. Kamen?
I happened to stop by yesterday when Scott was outside with his dog and gave me a little tour of the house. Fantastic. They've done beautiful extension on it, and you know, you won't find a more loved house or taken care of house in this village, I don't think. So it's going to look great with the copper.
Thank you, Dana.
You're welcome.
Any other comments or questions regarding the proposed roof replacement?
I'm not a board member. I'm just the planning director, but I do have a quick question. It's not really related to the roof per se, but I'm curious. How do you deal with leaves and getting caught into there? Is there like a grate, or is there? The Yankee gutters are actually very shallow, which is kind of the disadvantage and the advantage, but they don't tend to collect material because of that. The leaves just blow, they slide down the roof and right out of the gutter. So as opposed to the standard outboard gutter that forms a pocket, the Yankee gutter is really just a smooth divot in the porch. It's not meant to catch everything, just enough to make it so you don't have a waterfall around the building. So they're actually maintenance free in that sense.
Cool.
Well, without any other questions or comments, I would make a motion to approve the application without any amendment or conditions attached.
I'll second it.
That was a second from Phil
Phil,
Ferranda.
yes, I beg your pardon, sorry, yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I think I heard Catherine and Joyce Cole.
Yes.
Okay.
You heard me as
Yes.
well, although
And
I
Phil.
seconded it, so.
Okay. Very good.
Oh,
Thank you, Mr. Kamen. We wish you luck with this project. It's very exciting.
Thank you, guys. It's unusual to be on this side of the monitor. I thought about that a lot, and thank you for what you said about Joanne, and Dana, thank you, and I'll see you guys for the next repair and the one after that. So thank you.
Nice hearing from you. Good luck.
Aye.
Same here. Good night.
Okay. Bear with me, folks. We have a few items on the agenda tonight. Probably, oh boy. Jaime, is there any way you could share the agenda? Thanks, that's helpful. Okay, first, the high school essay/video contest. We are so close to launching this. I'm waiting to hear back from Mirla Puelo, who is the Director of Student Academics at Ossining High School, with whom Joyce Cole and I have been in contact through a few revisions. And we're very close to getting Mirla's final stamp of approval. She just wanted to run it by some of her colleagues. They've understandably been very, very busy. This is, I think, only the second week of school in this brave new world of online learning. So I will follow up with Ms. Puelo again sometime in the latter part of this week. And my hope is that this will be launched, meaning presented to the Ossining High School students, grades 9 through 12, before the end of the month. And Ms. Puelo thinks a deadline of October 30th is just fine. So I'm fine with that. And we expect to receive both essay submissions and video submissions. I do need to verify one last point with Jamie Kane, because I want to make sure that entrants who want to submit videos can do so by simply emailing their videos to her. And she was going to check, Jamie was going to check with the village tech person, I think it's Craig Cooper, to make sure that that's technologically okay, or if entrants would need to submit their video entries in some other way. Other than that, I think we're very close. Restoration efforts at the First Baptist Church. That's the
Adam, can I just interrupt for 1 second? I apologize.
Please, go ahead.
I'm a little leery of the October 30 date. Given
Okay.
everything that is going on in the schools, they are still remote for another week to 10 days, and who knows if they will continue as remote. You as a commission need to, consider that date may well have to be pushed, because I can just tell you from a daughter who teaches in another district, it is very, very difficult. Things are tough, and particularly, in some of the upper levels. So just making a point that October 30th, while I understand that that's what the administrator thinks is doable, that may be really pushing it.
What's the group's feeling?
I agree with Stuart.
Yeah, it sounded really
Soon.
ambitious.
What would be less ambitious, November 30th?
Yeah.
I think give them after Thanksgiving. I think that's more reasonable.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I don't have a problem with that. I don't want my enthusiasm to get in the way. So that's fine. Good. Thank you, Stuart.
Okay.
Restoration efforts at the First Baptist Church. Stuart, I'm going to call on you to say a bit about this. Briefly, I've been in touch with an individual, a congregant at the First Baptist Church. Her name is Genevieve, I believe Metzger is her last name. I'd have to confirm that. But
That's her name, yes.
The congregation is very, very concerned, as I am, about the fate of the steeple on that church. If you've driven past the church anytime within the last few months, you may have noticed a sign on Route 9 on the fence outside the church. Please help save our steeple. They're trying every way they know how to raise money to do the rehabilitation work that's necessary on the steeple. I've looked into grant opportunities, and I suppose I can continue looking, but my search has not been successful so far. Here's what I've turned up. Grants in the nature of technical assistance grants. They're small dollar amount grants that help people with historic properties determine, what exactly needs to be done to save the buildings or rehabilitate parts of the buildings, what kind of specialists they would need, scope of work and cost estimates. That's not what the First Baptist Church needs at this point. Joanne Tall had helped them sort of get a rough sense of the kind of work they need to do. She had started working on an environmental protection fund grant application with the congregation. That's a New York State Parks, Recreation, Historic Preservation grant. And that grant is a matching grant. And according to Genevieve, based on her conversations with Joanne, the work is going to be very, very expensive, well over $100,000. I don't want to put an exact number on it, but north of $100,000. And, I don't think the church has 50 to put up to match a state grant. So, Genevieve and I had a conversation recently, and a few things came up. She wanted to know whether the village might be able or willing to contribute toward the rehabilitation efforts. That was one subject that came up. Another subject that came up is sort of if all else fails, and again, I do not mean to put words in her mouth or commit her to anything or the congregation to anything. We were simply tossing around ideas. And in that sort of part of the discussion, tossing around ideas, I had suggested, well, what about a transfer of ownership of the church, say a transfer to the village? And the congregation could then become a tenant, and the village would then take over the responsibilities of maintenance and might be able to access more in the way of funding. And I told her, I really wasn't, not the right person to speak to about these issues. I don't represent the village. I told her I would get in touch with Corporation Counsel to discuss these things further. I had a brief conversation with Stuart, but I thought it would be useful for everyone to hear the sum and substance of the discussion that Stuart and I had on these 2 points. Whether the village could contribute anything, number one, and number two, the prospects of a transfer of ownership, what would be involved? Would it be something the village would consider at this point in time? So with that, if you wouldn't mind, Stuart, please take it away.
Sure, and I'm glad that Trustee Quezada is here so he can chime in any way he wants to as well. As to the first point, the village is prohibited by the Constitution of the State of New York from essentially giving a gift or a donation to anyone or anything. So that would prohibit the village from essentially giving money to the church to rehabilitate it. Would not be permitted. As to the second point, I think the difficulty there is more practical than anything else. You know, I don't speak for the Board of Trustees, but, you know, what I could say to you is this. If the village then became the owner of the property, the village then becomes responsible for the property, which means the village has to maintain the property. As Adam has indicated, the cost of that maintenance is quite high. We are entering into difficult budget times, to put it mildly. You know that the governor has already held back 20% of all funding for the schools for this year, and there may be more cuts coming down. The budget was written in such a way that there can be numerous cuts instituted by the Department of the Budget for state funding. So, you know, it's unclear, you know, what the village's budget will be in 2021, 2022, 2023. So I think that, you know, a transfer of that, you know, would be difficult, because it would, you know, then make, as I said, the village would then become the owner of the property, and in and of itself would have various responsibilities. That is more a determination that the village would have to make, you know, through its board, but through obviously recommendations of staff. But the first suggestion as to the village simply helping out the church in terms of contributing toward rehabilitation is a non-starter, because it would run afoul of New York's Constitution, which has a very specific prohibition on that.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions about what Stuart's just said, or thoughts about next steps?
Adam, if I may, I just wanted to thank you, Stuart.
Sure.
You know, one of the difficult situations that the board has been through the years that I've been part of it, just going to give you a clear example of a building not too far from the church, 200 Main Street. 200 Main Street, it was a gift to the village many years ago. And through the years, we have tried to repurpose the building itself. And it has become very difficult for us to maintain the building in some instance. So I'm not sure, I can tell you this right now, the village board, for previous conversations that we had in the past, we are not interested in the real estate business, as some board members have had put it that, you know, mildly, I guess. So as much as me personally, I would love the church to be restored, because many years back, when I was part of the HPC, that church came in front of us with a plan, with architectural drawings and details, and they were thinking of restoring not just so a lot of the windows. Pretty much it was the whole exterior renovation at that time. So it's sad for me to see that the struggle, but I can tell you right now, that will not be an option, at least from my end, to become a landlord of a particular tenant. It's just not feasible at this point of time. You know, as sad as it sounds, and it breaks my heart to even say that. But we cannot take that liability from another, you know, from another building itself at this point.
Thank you for sharing.
I would say, you know, unfortunately, this is an issue congregations around the country are facing. We happen to have a surplus of large, magnificent churches from the 19th century. And a good many of them are struggling. The Methodist Church is, both Methodist churches have been closed down by the people in charge of the Methodist Church in this country. You know, we're going to talk about that later. The Stone Church downtown has got a congregation of about 12 people. And this church, you know, there used to be hundreds and hundreds of people. And, you know, these religion or these churches were the center of people's social lives, spiritual lives, so many things. And that's changed a lot. And it's something we're going to have to, over the next few years, unfortunately, you know, we're going to have to figure out what to do with these churches. You can repurpose some of them. You know, the congregation might want to consider selling it. I mean, people buy churches and repurpose them, you know, for other things, but they just become these huge white elephants, and it's sad. And you know, we've got, you know, this one is like the landmark one. It's in the middle, the heart of the village. It's the thing you see. But yeah, the village already has, you know, this just is not going to have the resources or the will to take that on. And I don't have a solution, you know, unfortunately, but it's a problem that we're going to face more and more of, I think.
I'll make a comment. I was in the Berkshires recently, and I was in a small town called West Stockbridge. Beautiful 19th century church with a lot of decorative barge board on it. And are all these workers on scaffolding outside, sanding away, I suppose in preparation for painting. I'm running out of ideas, but I was thinking of picking up the phone and finding out how they managed to get together the funding to make that happen. Something on the order of that needs to happen at least. Maybe not every square inch needs to be redone at this point, but you know, there are parts of the steeple that are deteriorating rapidly, and maybe some at least temporary kind of fix can be implemented. I don't know. You know, this is underlying this. You know, it's obvious that this is there's a provision in the code that talks about you know, demolition by neglect. This is not that situation by any stretch. This church is fighting to find a way to save this steeple and the other exterior features of the building that are deteriorating. They just don't have the means, and I'm out of ideas. But I will continue looking at grant opportunities. I may reach out to this church in West Stockbridge, and please, anyone, if you have ideas, let me know.
Well, I have you know, the First Presbyterian up the street there is lucky enough to have a parishioner and occasional sermon giver named Tom Clemens, who also happens to be one of the leading restoration or contractors in the Hudson Valley. And he does a lot of, that's why that church is so beautifully maintained inside, is he does a lot of it, and I think he does a lot of it on his own dime, out of love. I mean, you may be able to find, maybe they could find someone who will do it as a charitable act. I swear, I know this sounds crazy, but maybe even talk to Tom about it. You know, maybe there's a way to find someone who can do the labor part of it. Maybe enough money can be raised for, I mean, they're going to need a crane. I mean, good grief, I don't know what it's going to take. Mm-hmm. But a miracle is what it's going to take. But I'm going to reach out to Tom and ask his advice.
Dana, I think that's a great idea.
All right.
Thanks. And Dana, you brought to my attention a very interesting issue with another church in the village that's also on the agenda, the Methodist Church on Emwilton Street. Could you say a few words about that?
Well, that was, again, their congregation had shrunk to about 6 people. Not that long ago, it was 600. So they were eager. That's a fascinating church. If you can, I don't know, we can't get inside now, it's locked up. But the worship area, the sanctuary is round. And it's not pews as where it's round, it's circular, which would make it an amazing sort of performance space. But they were approached. I mean, apparently there are people who are middlemen for Tiffany windows, and they were approached by a guy who wanted to buy their Tiffany window. Apparently they've got a few others too, and offered them $1 million. It's hard to say no to that. And so they were eager to take it because then they would have money to do all these repairs they wanted to do, right? Well, they went to the Methodist church, and I got this straight from one of the guys involved, okay? So you can take this to the bank. They went to the Methodist diocese, or whatever you call it, to tell them what they wanted to do. And the diocese said, you know what? Go ahead and sell it, but we're shutting you down. And what's happened is the Methodist church is splitting in 2, apparently, over gay marriage, I think. And it's affecting, I mean, it's having an earthquake effect on things. But in the meantime, the guy came and took the window. He also told them he was going to create a replica for them. Well, gee, gosh, shocking, he didn't. So they're feeling a little cheated. They don't have a window or a church anymore. And from what I understand, the guy's going to refurbish it and sell it, turn it around, flip it, make a profit, I assume, to a museum in Texas. Now, obviously, since that's in the historic district, and I think, is it locally landmarked?
Yeah.
But I don't know if it ever even occurred to them that they had to go to the HPC. I don't know if it, you know what I mean? Like, I know Peter, and I'm not sure. And so now we're like, well, wait a minute, you've just completely changed the outside appearance of this church, right? And he put plain glass in there. So you've gone from having this incredibly valuable, beautiful window to having plain glass. So not only is the window gone, but the church is probably going to be sold along with the rectory next to it. And we have to brace ourselves for what may come, but I'm not feeling very, you know, who knows, but so I don't know, but I don't even know if we were in any position to say to the congregation, you can't sell that window, or to say to the Methodist diocese, you can't sell that window. These churches have their own, you know, they don't pay taxes, if I'm correct, right? They're tax-free. They kind of just do what they want. They're governed by their religious structures, right? But unfortunately, they are a massive part of our landscape. And we have very little control over what happens with them. So I'm not sure. At this point, I mean, it's not like you can say to the guy, give the window back. I mean, it's gone. I don't know where it is. I imagine it's in pieces somewhere in storage. And I'm going to try and get the guy's name if you want me to, and we can try and talk to him at least and just, I don't know, chew him out or something. I don't know, you know, I don't know what could have been done. But it's a complicated relationship. I mean, it's a complicated situation, and it's not unconnected to what's happening to all these big churches, right? So, you know, the most successful churches in town are the Catholic churches. St. Augustine's and St. Anne's. And Presbyterian gets a decent number of people on any given Sunday. But otherwise, you know, otherwise they're really struggling. So I think this is going to be on a macro scale, what's going to happen with it. And I'm not the first one to think of this. John Fry, who was on the planning board for a long time as his architect, is been saying, signaling for years, trying to raise the alarm that we're going to have a real issue with these churches. So that's the situation that I know of, and I don't know at this point what recourse we possibly have. But I think the Methodist diocese saw $1 million and said, we're taking that, closing the church. I don't know what happened, but the money went to them. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty crazy. Pretty crazy.
All right. Well, I have some thoughts. First, a question for Corporation Counsel. Are stained glass windows an exterior feature subject to HPC review? And if you'd rather discuss, in a more, off the record, Stuart, we can do that.
It's possible it might be. I should just say, the problem is the deed's done.
Yeah.
So there's really literally nothing you can do. There's no one to issue a violation against, because what's going to happen? I mean, you're not going to get it back. So, but is it potentially, I would argue that it is considered an exterior change. You guys do get involved with windows.
Yeah.
So, this is, a stained glass, a window at the church, but unfortunately this horse is out of the barn.
Yeah, I wonder if we have to worry about other horses running out of the barn, like.
Right. I mean, the Trinity has incredible windows, including a couple Tiffany's. I mean, cash-strapped churches could start selling their windows. Does the First Baptist have any valuable windows? Because maybe I don't know, that's how they could fund their steeple. But we may. There needs to be some way where we alert the churches in town that you can't just sell your windows without, coming before the HPC. I don't know.
So, quick question: if you wanted to remove a window, you don't ordinarily need a building permit? Because if they are required to get a building permit to replace their windows and they didn't do that, then I don't see why we can't just fine the church for removing and replacing a window. I don't know how popular that is, but if you want to stop churches from doing stuff, then perhaps you should, at a minimum, penalize them at the same level you would penalize anybody else for doing something they shouldn't have done.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I mean, I think some sort of sternly worded legal letter to
Wouldn't blame the guy who bought the windows. I'd blame the church.
No, I'd blame the church we have to find out who to send it to and tell them just straight up that this wasn't, kosher, mixed religions, and that, they're going to be fined. That there's a fine for this, and here it is. And they, I just worry it'll erupt into a legal battle.
Dana,
but it feels like something has to be done.
Yeah. Dana, you mentioned that they were supposed to do a replica. Was
that
the
guy said he was going to do a replica for them. Well, shockingly enough, he didn't.
Was it in writing?
I don't know.
Because at minimum, if you're going to find this man, maybe hold him to the replica to get some, semblance of what was there.
Well, what he's going to say is, if the church is closed and it's going to be sold, why should I bother doing a replica? That's what he's going to say. But that's not,
say that.
But we can still, go after, I'll talk to my friend again, who's a part of, in the middle of this whole thing, and see if I can get the guy's name. And, we could send him a letter and say, and I could see if Peter had he's got anything in writing. I mean, I would imagine that would be incredibly expensive to replicate this massive Tiffany window.
Just out of curiosity, Dana, you had mentioned that there was a church that was on the market on top of everything else. Is this that same church?
It's going to be on the market.
It's going on the market. Yeah.
Probably at some point. I mean, they're going to sell it. They don't.
That actually, I'm more concerned about the window is an issue, but I'm concerned about the whole structure.
Oh, so, yeah, we should.
If the owners think they can remove a stained glass window without speaking to the village about it because they don't seem to be aware, or they willfully ignored the landmark status. What might happen if they intend to do something more significant to the exterior of the building?
Well, they could petition to tear it down and build an apartment building. It's a pretty big piece of property if you go all the way back to the rectory. You know, it's a decent size. It's right by the high school. I mean, you know, it's something that we have to think about. You know, I mean, could you make it into apartments? I suppose. I don't know. It's not my area.
That would be pretty difficult.
It would be pretty difficult given the design of it inside, and it's just not conducive to that. So.
What you said about, you know, making a theater, there's a desanctified, I don't know if that's the word, church up in Mohegan Lake on Route 6 that is a wine bar.
St. George's,
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think you're somewhat limited in what you can do. There was a little church across from Ossining High School that became a residence about 10, 15 years ago, as I recall.
There's one on, well, there is in Sparta. There's the old Sparta church is the former mayor lives there.
Well, but across from the big parking lot behind the high school. There's a.
Oh, that was a Christian Science church.
Yeah, small parsonage.
And it's now a home. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Jaime, I assume you're the one who put that image up?
Yeah.
Thank you for doing that. Dana, to your knowledge, the window that was removed, is it the one that's...
The big one in the middle.
Okay, so what's there now? Just transparent glass?
Plain glass. Yeah, it doesn't look so good. And I think they may have one or two other Tiffany windows. I'm going to find out because those, you know, maybe we can at least protect those. But I think that the churches in town, well, the only one I know of that would have very valuable windows is Trinity. I can't see them doing this. That's Episcopal. But they share a priest or a minister. With the Episcopal St. Paul's on the Hill. So, you know, they're all, it's tough. But
well,
I think that we have to send a letter out to somebody.
I mean, what's to stop them from selling the rest of their windows at this point if they don't get some sort of punishment?
Right, that's the thing. They very well might.
You know, they got $1 million for those. They might get something for the other ones.
Yeah, I think somebody told me they have a couple other Tiffany's. So, you know, if the building is endangered, people will come and offer to buy them.
I mean, these are nice right here. Obviously, those are the Tiffany ones right here, and these are, you know, fancy stained glass windows.
I mean, I'll look into and I'll see if any of them. See, there's the rectory for it right there, which has been a child care center, and that's a great house. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a great house, you know. And it was built. If you look, you'll see it was built with the church and has the similar architectural features, details. But I just think we have to brace ourselves for whatever happens on this site.
So Dana, in regards to what could happen in that site, just keep something in mind that that is an S75 zone, which is a single family. Mm-hmm. So even if they try to sell it, I'm not sure if they'll be able to do anything, you know. Yeah. So it, you know, in that regards, you know, they can obviously try to do something. It's very unlikely that will change. Because as you guys are aware, we are going through the comp plan right now, and we haven't got to that part yet, but we are not looking into rezone anything in that area. So again, to try to conserve the integral parts of the church, I agree. You know, and try to that is they're thinking of selling, they could definitely most likely sell it. I'm not sure what the potentials are there in an S75 for that matter. So
Well, there's an apartment building directly across the street from this.
yes, which is a PO zone, and they're also in an MF2 zone and a T zone right across the street. So literally, that street divides those two zones. I'm looking at the zoning map right now. That's why I'm saying those things.
And then the Sing Sing Marble Mansion is a apartment house now, apartment building behind it over here. This over here. That one.
Correct. And that, just again, Dana, so keep in mind, I'm looking at the zoning map, and where that church is and everything else within a high school is an S75. So everything across the street from that church is you compile on two different zones. So it's a totally different zoning regulations on those properties.
So houses like these, large houses on large lots, essentially, is all you can build. So the cost of tearing down this building would only yield you a few houses at best. It's not financially reasonable to think that they would tear this building down to do that.
You could make it a senior living facility with a conditional permit.
Yeah, maybe it could be repurposed. Hopefully, you know, in something. It'd be a great theater. But
how many seats could it fit as a theater? I mean, how many seats could it fit as a theater?
No, it would be. I mean, it's not like a movie theater. It would be plays and musical stuff.
That would require a use variance to do that. So that would be another issue.
Well, I'd give them a use variance if they adaptively reused it and preserved it. But the fact remains that.
Well, actually, you bring up a really good point now. I'm glad you just mentioned that. So as a part of the comprehensive plan, since everybody seems to be talking about these churches, perhaps we should add some language in the comprehensive plan that allows for the village to, provide some sort of adaptive reuse for churches that no longer are, functioning as churches. In order to preserve them, allow them to be used differently, and allow for adaptive reuse that preserves the exterior architecture, but allows them to be used in ways that may not be explicitly compliant with the zoning underneath. That's actually a very interesting concept.
Well, I think, it'd be one way to start addressing this looming problem. I mean, it is directly next to the high school and whatever, I don't know why I said that, but.
Well, adaptive reuse is as broader as limited as you want it to be, right? So
I think it'd be good to consider these churches in the comp plan, and somebody to talk to would be John Fry, who's thought a lot about this, but I think that's a good idea, something about adaptive reuse, because it's better than losing the building or just letting it rot. Because otherwise you're just going to have a church sitting here rotting. And it's going to have the same kinds of problems as the First Baptist.
Well, not that far on Walden, there's the other church that was reused and repurposed for residential, correct?
Yeah, it was a small Christian Science church. Yeah. It's very small. And
the same thing in Tarrytown a couple of years back. Literally, this one is also right across the street from, and I don't know the name of the church, but right across the street from the high school, behind that main church is another small church that was reused and repurposed for apartments. So that one is also.
In Dobbs Ferry, there's an old church that is being reused as like a creative arts center. Called the Purple House or something. So, I mean, it's something that happens. It happens. And I think, I'm surprised we don't have language like that already, but I think we should think about it.
I mean, it really is kind of interesting. You look at the site. I mean, it's obviously we'd need a lot of work, but there would be, I think there is a possible way of adapting it into, where you could keep the facade on the street on Emwilton and on 9 and sort of convert the back and maybe even tear down parts of the back that you don't see from the road, but like allow for residential in there. I don't know. I mean, this house here is the rectory house.
Yeah, that's the rectory house, the big house.
Yeah. So if you look at it from that standpoint, I mean, if you start to open up the possibilities, you know, I don't really have any way to speak about it forward or negative, but I do think that you're right. I mean, these churches, if they can't support themselves financially, there's just going to be more and more of this happening.
Yep, there is. My big concern is the Stone Church downtown, which was the original St. Paul's, and that congregation moved to Ganong, to the town, in around 1960, and the church was threatened with demolition with the rest of downtown, and it was saved, and it's extraordinarily historic and has an incredible story. And they couldn't even, there's 12 members of that Baptist congregation, Calvary Baptist, and they meet in the rectory across the street because they can't afford to turn the heat on in the church. However, they do rent it out to an Hispanic congregation. It has a sign up, and that's something that the Methodist was doing too, and it wasn't enough. But that's, you know, but the First Baptist is just so, you know, they're both so visible and high visibility, and you know, you got 4 big ones right there in a group. So it's just something that's going to have to be.
I just want to make sure I heard you right. So you're saying they can't turn the heat on in this building?
They can't afford to heat it. They literally don't have
the
the
church
money.
Still meets there even without the heat on?
No, they meet in the rectory across the street.
No. So you said there's 2 churches. There's the church that they rented to as well. So there's a second church that rents space there.
This one is the church. They rent it too. They rent it. I guess, I don't know if they just, I don't know how it all works, but the guy who runs the place literally told me that. And it was in such bad shape in the basement, they had flooding, and they had a bunch of volunteers from other Baptist churches come and fix it. The rectory across the street is extraordinary. And both of them are incredible, but together. My dream is to have a bookstore in the rectory. What do you think? Live on top, bookstore on the bottom. Anyway, so never mind. We have to protect these structures. You know, they have meaning.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not a religious person, but they're beautiful and they're highly visible. But nobody's got the money. You know, the village is not going to be in a position to do much, I don't think.
All right. Well,
Maybe
with that,
from New York City will buy it.
I think between now and the next meeting, Dana, let's you and I talk some more about the church on Emwilton, and I might be in touch with Stuart to discuss the prospect of writing some kind of correspondence to remind the church that it is part of a landmark district, and that exterior changes need to be approved by the HPC.
Can we figure out if there's any sort of fine that we can?
Not without it. With all due respect, Dana, I'm not going to have the code enforcement officers write a violation at this stage. Okay? We are so backed up in the courts now. I'm just not going to have them take the time to do that. I apologize, but it's
okay.
We have a lot of life safety. We have a lot of life safety issues to deal with in the court. This is not one of them.
But maybe a sternly worded letter.
Could be. But you know what? At the end of the day,
Doesn't
if they
matter.
want to sell the rest of their building or sell the other windows, it's going to get done.
Yeah, there's not much we can do.
But let me know before the next meeting and we'll put something together.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything else they wish to raise? We've gone through the agenda.
Well, I don't know if you want me to bring up Miguel Hernandez's request to extend the museum in the streets to the Brandreth property and to erect a sign across the street from it. I mean, I've been wanting to extend the museum in the streets up Croton Avenue, but I just don't know if, you know, we're going to have the budget right now. That just doesn't seem super important.
I received an email from Miguel Hernandez. It was not addressed to me or to anyone in particular. I don't know how many other people received the email. It arrived in my inbox sometime over the weekend. I acknowledged receipt this morning, suggesting that an additional sign be placed on the or across from the former Brandreth Pill Factory. I think it's a good suggestion, an interesting one. I would suggest that we maybe put on the agenda for the next meeting a discussion of the museum in the streets, which I have to acknowledge I'm not entirely familiar with. And if I'm not entirely familiar with it, I think that's an issue. I wonder, how many people know about the museum in the streets, how accessible the various parts are online, and who's overseeing it, and all of that.
I will say that in the last few days, in the last few weeks, I've seen a lot of people looking. There's like a master sign by the entrance to the aqueduct.
Right.
I've seen a lot of people checking that out.
Right.
And people do look at them.
What I would suggest is that we save discussion of the museum in the streets for the next meeting. I'd like to discuss Miguel's proposal. I'd like to discuss ideas others might have for placing additional signs, and your folks' views generally about, the accessibility of this program, or people using it, what can be done to promote it, and so forth. So I propose we delay that to the next meeting.
Okay.
Anything else? Phil, did you have something to add?
No, I was actually hoping no one else would add anything.
Okay. With that, I'll take that as a motion to adjourn.
Okay, yes, I made that motion, I suppose.
Okay, would anyone like to second Phil's motion?
Second.
All in favor of adjourning this evening's meeting?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, with that, thank you all. Jaime, Manny, Catherine, Dana, Stewart, Joyce, Phil, thank you.
Okay, bye.